Well, this morning, one of the big banks got a whole lot bigger. The Commonwealth Bank announced a half-yearly profit of more than $3 billion. The share market, of course, loved it, but customers have every right to be angry. Now the federal government is being urged to adopt the system the Dutch have been using for years. It makes changing banks as easy as asking. James Thomas has more.
In Australia, statistically speaking, you're a greater chance of getting divorced than you are of swapping banks. Of course, the institutions know that. They make it deliberately painful for you to move. However, it doesn't have to be that way. In the Netherlands, for example, it is blissfully easy. So now, in Australia, there are calls for us to go Dutch.
In the Netherlands, you sign a form, your new bank does all the hard work for you. That's the way to go.
Choice Magazine's Richard Lloyd has been lobbying the federal government for fairer banking through an ongoing Senate inquiry.
Who's gaining something from the current system and doesn't want to change?
It's the banks here are resisting this. It's the banking industry doesn't want to move the system over to an easier switching scheme. And that's got to be bad for all of us because of...
Sorry. Hello? You don't want to be filmed, but you want to interrupt our filming.
Richard says that this banker running interference behind the scenes is a metaphor for an industry which publicly supports competition.
NAB. More give, less take.
But behind closed doors is doing everything to avoid a more open market.
We're just wondering why it's so hard to switch banks.
They want to hang on to their customers. They don't want people to be able to move around the system.
And it seems to be working. At 17 million people, the Netherlands has a population which is less than ours, at 22 million. Yet, when it comes to switching banks, 100,000 Dutch switch every year. In Australia, it's a miserable 2,541.
Look, I think the banks rely on a concept called entanglement. You get tangled up with your home loan, with your credit cards, with your direct debits, and it makes it very difficult to change. And I think the banks rely on that.
Under the Dutch scheme, the bank you want to switch undertakes to do all the paperwork in transferring your transaction accounts. Senator Nick Xenophon supports the idea of going Dutch.
If you want real competition in the banking sector, then allowing people to have the power to change banks, to switch easily, is a big factor.
And this issue of Dutch, I mean, to me, it's double Dutch.
Mark Bouris of the non-bank lender Yellow Brick Road says the Dutch system doesn't go far enough. It applies to transaction accounts only. That means your savings account or your cheque account or your debit account.
The Dutch sort of outcome or the solution is about switching like accounts, like trading accounts. What we really need to switch in Australia is your mortgage account.
And that remains a ridiculously convoluted process.
You've got to get valuations. I've got to verify your income. I've got to make sure that the contract that you've supplied to me is a proper contract. Until that stuff becomes automated, I don't expect to see the mortgage process to be just simply one signature and one approval, one consent.
It may be a way off, but at the very least, Choice says we must go Dutch on transaction accounts.
It's the big four banks who this week are reporting record-breaking profits, who are trying to block progress, trying to block it being easier for consumers to switch.